Hello, my name is Ollie. This is my Logic Pro tutorial. I'm going to be teaching you how to record, mix, and master your own tracks very briefly in this video. This is a very beginner guide, so if you want to see more in-depth videos on certain subjects, then leave a like, subscribe, and leave in the comments what you think I should do next. Let's get to it. Okay, first things first, this is an audio interface. This is how you can record instruments into your computer, into Logic. This one I have here is the Focusrite Scarlett Solo. This has one XLR input on the back, which I am currently using to speak to you guys, and one instrument input on the front, as well as a headphone output for monitoring. Today I'll be recording guitars, so I'm going to feed my guitar into the instrument input. I'm going to show you how to set the gain properly so that you're not clipping and that you get a good healthy signal coming into Logic. First things first, on this specific model, if I want to record an instrument, I need to click this instrument button. Okay, as you can see, I have a guitar plugged into the audio interface now. I'm going to set my gain. So what I'm going to want to do is use my palm to mute the strings and pluck. This is a very strong signal, so this is a good way to set your gain. I'm going to keep plucking until we hit the red. There we go, I've started to hit the red there. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to dial it back a little until I don't hit the red anymore. And there seems to be our sweet spot. Now we will have a nice strong signal going into Logic. Okay, now let's move on to Logic Pro. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a mic or line in track. This is to record my guitars. I'm then going to select what I'm using for my guitar tone, which is Archetype Nolly. This is an amp simulation program and what I will be using for my guitar tone throughout. What I'm telling you here would be exactly the same if you were to mic up a real amp and cabinet as well. Now that we have our input, I'm going to duplicate it twice, so we have 3 tracks in total. I'm going to name the first one Recording, and then the second one, I'm going to name it Guitars Left, and the third one, I'm going to name Guitar Right. I'm then going to pan the guitar left, hard left, and the guitar right, hard right. Now when we record on the recording channel, we can do as many takes as we want using Logic's cycle feature. You can toggle this on and off by clicking this button up here, or using the keyboard shortcut by pressing C. You can select how many bars by dragging the slider, and when you record, it will keep looping over and over, so you can do as many takes as you want. Now I can record my guitar takes. What I'm going to want to do is I'm going to record the guitar part exactly the same twice. I'm then going to copy one onto the guitar left and one onto the guitar right. You must make sure you record the guitar twice. You can't just copy and paste, as this will introduce phasing and not give your guitars a nice wide effect. Okay, now we have our guitar tracks in. As you can hear, this is a mono signal. However, we recorded multiple takes of it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this down twice, get rid of the original, we don't need that. And I'm going to choose take 1 for this one, for my guitar left, and take 2 for my guitar right. I advise wearing headphones for this as the effect will be more obvious, but as you can hear, it is much wider in the stereo field. I'm going to record some more guitar layers, maybe a lead part over this, and then we can move on to the next stage. Okie dokie, first things first, I'm going to create a software instrument track in Logic. Then, I'm going to move over to the instrument and select my drum plugin. Now I have my drum plugin open, I can quickly hear what the drums sound like. And I can also play them on my MIDI keyboard. Okay, now I'm going to try and record a drum part with my keyboard. But first things first, I'm going to listen back to the guitar riff that I made and try and come up with something in my head that I think will be cool. Okay, now we've settled on a drum beat, we can double click the MIDI to open up the MIDI editor. What I'm going to do is I'm quickly going to drag my mouse over the MIDI to select it all, and then I'm going to quantize it. You can click Q to quantize, and what this does is it snaps each note to the grid so that it is perfectly in time. Now I've clicked Q, we can listen back and see how it sounds. I've hit these drums a little bit too hard, so I'm just going to bring the velocities down a little. Now I'm going to record some cymbals. So I'm going to find the cymbals on my MIDI device. I like this one quite a lot. And then all I'm going to do is I'm going to click record again and just record this over the top of the original MIDI. As you can see, that was incredibly easy. Same thing again, I'm going to drag my mouse over them and snap them to the grid with Q, and then I'm going to give it a listen. I want this first note to be a different cymbal, so I'm just going to drag it around until I find something that I think is cool. There you go. Now that I have my drum part, I want to copy it over to the rest of the song. To do this, I'm going to click on the MIDI, hold Option on my keyboard, and click the MIDI and drag it. As you can see, there is a little plus sign. This means it is copying. Make sure you let go of the mouse first before you let go of Option, and you have copied the track. I'm going to repeat this until all of the parts have drums. Now we can give that a listen. Okay, let's get some bass guitars done. Again, I'll be programming it with my MIDI keyboard here, just like the drums, and this is a very, very similar process. So let's go do that now. Okay, in Logic, you're going to want to create another software instrument track, just like so. Select from your instrument lists the bass plugin that you are going to be using. If you're using a real bass, it'll be the same as the guitars. You plug it into your audio interface, etc., etc. I'm going to be using Circuit Bass today. This is a free bass plugin. I highly recommend you check it out. Here's how it sounds out of the box. Sounds absolutely brilliant to my ears. I will be using the crunch setting here, just for a little bit more bite, and I think I may lower the treble and up the bass a little bit, as well as give it some of this humanize knob, which gives you some variation in the picking of the bass. Okay, now we have our bass track set up. We will need to work out what the root notes of the guitar part is. To do this, I recommend soloing the guitar parts and turning them down quite a lot so that you can hear the bass guitar over the guitars. Solo your bass track as well so you can hear all three and start playing around. Cool, I found my root notes. I think this is an A, an F, and a D. So now let's record those in. Again, we're going to use the cycle feature up top here so that we can loop the bass recording. On my MIDI keyboard here, there is a hold feature. When clicked in, a note will ring out for a while until I click hold again. I think this sounds a lot more natural, so I'll be using this for this track. Okay, let's punch the bass in. Okay, perfect. I'm pretty happy with those takes. First thing I'm going to do, just like the drums, double tap the MIDI to open it, select all of it and click Q to quantize. Let's give it a listen. We can now bring the guitars back up to their original levels, and let's give it a listen. I think my MIDI is hitting a little bit too hard, so I'm just going to lower the velocities on them. And again, just like the drums, we're going to select the MIDI, hold Option, and copy it over the track all throughout the song so that we have bass throughout each part. Now we can give it a listen in full context. Okay, awesome. Okay, let's start mixing some of the instruments now. A wonderful way to think about mixing is allocating each instrument a certain frequency range. So, bass guitars and bass drum are obviously going to sit down in the bass frequencies. A guitar is a very mid-range focused instrument, so it's going to sit around the mid-range. All of your overheads, your hi-hats, your cymbals, the ch, super high end in the frequency. So they're all going to sit up here, right? If you keep these things in mind, the mixing is going to be so much easier. Okay, let's do the guitars first. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to select one of the guitar tracks, hold Command and select the other. Then I'm going to right click and click Create Track Stack. I'm going to use the Summing Stack option and click Create. What this does is it puts both of these guitar tracks under one track, which when you edit affects both of them. I'm then going to select a bit of this guitar performance to listen to, open up an EQ, and solo the guitars so that I can just hear them. Remember what I said about frequencies. If the low range is the bass drum, then we don't need a lot of low range in a guitar tone. If the high end is the overheads, we don't need a lot of high end in the guitar tone either. A common thing with guitars as well is there is a lot of fizz up in the high end, so EQing a lot of that out can make your guitar tone sound a lot tighter and clearer. Let's have a listen to this now. I can also hear a rather harsh frequency around 4K. I typically like to EQ this out, so I'm just going to create a notch, make it really loud, try and pinpoint it, and then drop it down. There we go. Now let's listen to it on and off. This effect will be a lot more obvious with headphones, so I implore you to wear them. Okay, moving on to the lead guitar, we're going to take a very similar approach. Solo out the lead guitar, listen to it. Again, we don't need a lot of low end. That's for the bass and the bass drum. We don't need a lot of high end, as there's a lot of fizz, and the cymbals are going to sit up there. Let's listen to it on and off. Night and day difference, right? Now let's listen to all of the guitars together to see how they sound. That's all the work we really need to do on the guitars, as most of the guitar tone is made up by the amp, the player, and the guitar itself. Okay, I'm going to quickly move on to the drums. This is a pre-mixed drum kit, so I don't really have much work to do. Shout out to GGD. They are a wonderful company and make some absolutely amazing drum plugins. So I'm going to open up the mixer of this drum plugin, and I'm just going to solo the drums and listen out for anything that I think sounds a bit wrong. The only problem I have really with this, other than some of the levels, is there is the cymbal that is just a little bit too high for my liking. It's a bit too piercing, so I'm going to solo that out and just try and duck the EQ. Yep, that's much better. Okay, I'm going to move on to the bass next. Okay, moving on to bass guitar. Bass guitar is quite easy to mix, really. I like to add a compressor and I like to EQ just a little bit to get out any harsh sounds and maybe take out some of the really, really low end, as it's just a bit too muddy. So let's go to do that now. Sounds great as it is. First thing I'm going to do is add a compressor. A great way to describe a compressor to you is imagine your waveform looks like this, right? Here are the loud sounds, here are the quiet sounds. As you start to dial up the compressor, the loud sounds come down like this and the quiet sounds come up like this. That's the best way I can describe a compressor to you. Some of the other settings on a compressor I will show you here. Some of the settings on a compressor are attack and release. Attack is just how fast the compressor acts, and release is how quickly or slowly it lets go of the sound. And then input and output, as you can see, if I dial the input up, it gets really aggressive. And if I dial the output up, it makes the sound louder. So I like to keep mine ducking about -5 dB on the compressor. And just give it a bit of a volume boost. I use quite a quick attack and a fairly slow release. It just sounds a little bit too attacky on each pick, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and locate that on the EQ and just take it out a little bit. I'm pretty happy with that. I've just EQ'd some of the really, really low muddy bits out as well because it just doesn't need that much mud. Okay, awesome. Your track is recorded. You have everything mixed. The final stage is mastering. So let's get to it. In Logic, if you press X on your keyboard, you will bring up the mixing page. This is the best way to see all of your tracks at once and to tweak all of your levels. As you can see here, you have your stereo out channel. This is where you will add all of your mastering plugins. Alternatively, you can see it right next to any track that you select. Here, it will say mastering, audio effects, and EQ. You can add a master EQ and any effects that you'd like in this section. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a multiband compressor. I'm using a free multiband compressor called OTT. This is an over-the-top compressor. As you can see, it is very harsh. I'm going to dial this in to around 11%. What this does is it just glues everything together nicely and makes it sound a bit more punchy. Let's audition that on and off. Then I'm going to be using another free plugin called Heatwave. This is a saturation plugin. What this does is it brings out more natural frequencies in the sounds and brings some subtle distortion. Okay, perfect. Now we can use Logic's inbuilt mastering tool. What this does is analyzes your track and adds mastering plugins based on the track itself. So let's do that here. Click mastering. Let it analyze your track. As you can see, mastering assistant analyzing. Takes a few seconds, not very long. And here we have the mastering assistant. As we can see, it has added an EQ curve. You can add an exciter, which brings out some of the higher frequencies. You can tweak the loudness and you can tweak the stereo width. Now with the mastering assistant, without touching any of the settings, here is how it sounds. I'm going to bring up the loudness just a little bit. This automatically adds a limiter, so you don't have to worry about any loud sounds clipping, as it already chops off anything that clips. I've added a little bit of loudness here just to bring the track volume up. I blended the EQ in at 85% as I think that sounds pretty good. Instead of using Logic's Mastering Assistant's Excite tool to add some higher frequencies, instead I'm going to use a plugin called Fresh Air. This is a free plugin from the same company that do Heatwave. Both of those are free. And what this does is adds some of the higher frequencies without adding too much distortion. Okay, that is mastering done. It is that simple. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to switch between the unmastered and the mastered version with this button right here. This lets you hear everything off and everything on. Okay, there's the track mastered. I'm just going to clean up some of the edges here and there. Maybe add a cool drum fill intro and maybe like a cool like fade in or something. That is basically it. So yeah, let's listen to the track. Right, that's it. Thank you so much for watching. Leave a like, subscribe, leave a comment. Let me know what you thought. Let me know what you want next. All of that jazz. And yeah, I'll see you in the next one. Peace.